right, so let's dive into the world of Ed Gein.
Oh, yeah, a name that is just horrifying and fascinating all at the same time.
It really is. True crime always seems to grab our attention. It's like this morbid curiosity, trying to figure out what makes people commit such horrific acts.
Yeah.
And you sent us some source material on Ed Gein from Wikipedia.
Right.
To try to kind of get a better understanding of this guy. So what should we explore first about Ed Gein?
Well, I think to really understand Ed Gein, we kind of have to go back to his beginnings. He grew up on this isolated Wisconsin farm. And it wasn't just quiet, it was practically cut off from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And that isolation, that coupled with his mother, Augusta's intense religious fervor, really shaped him and his worldview.
So it was more than just a strict upbringing.
Yeah.
It sounds like from the sources, Augusta really saw the world, especially women, as just inherently sinful.
Exactly. And can you imagine growing up with that messaging constantly?
Yeah.
It's no wonder that Ed developed this warped perspective on women and sexuality.
Yeah, it's almost like she created this bubble of fear and paranoia that he could never escape from.
And within that bubble, the only source of love and stability, albeit twisted, came from Augusta.
Right.
And then you add on the deaths of Ed's father and brother, especially his brother Henry. His death was, shrouded in these suspicious circumstances.
Are we suggesting that something else might have happened there?
It's really impossible to know for sure, but the circumstances surrounding Henry's death were never fully explained. But what we do know is that these losses really left Ed alone. And that isolation, combined with the warped worldview he inherited from his mother, that created fertile ground for a psychological spiral.
So we have this isolated upbringing, a domineering and mother that basically demonizes women, and then a loss of his entire family. It's like a recipe for disaster.
It really is.
But how does this lead to the crimes that made him infamous?
Well, it started with grave robbing. Ed began exhuming bodies from local cemeteries, specifically choosing middle-aged women who resembled his mother.
Wait, so even in death, his obsession with his mother was front and center. That's disturbing, but it's almost sad in a way.
It's very complex psychologically, but some experts think that he was trying to recapture his mother's presence.
Wow.
And this is really where we start to see his necrophilia emerge. And, this fascination with female corpses, it really stemmed from his distorted views of women and sexuality that were instilled by his mother.
Okay, so this is where it starts to get really creepy.
What?
But grave robbing, even with necrophilia, it's a far cry from murder.
Right.
Was there a specific event that marked that escalation?
It seems like the turning point was the murder of Mary Hogan, a tavern owner, and Bernice Warden. She ran the local hardware store.
And it was the investigation into Bernice Warden's disappearance that uncovered the House of Horrors.
Exactly.
Or what did they find when they went into his farm?
It wasn't just evidence of a crime, it was like walking into a nightmare. Furniture upholstered in human skin, bowls made from skulls, masks fashioned from the faces of his victims. They found a woman's suit, meticulously crafted from human skin.
It's almost beyond comprehension. Did these creations serve a purpose for Gein, or was it just the product of a disturbed mind?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Some psychologists believe that he was trying to become his mother, to inhabit her skin and to keep her close to him.
So not just replacing her in life, but literally trying to become her. That's a horrifying manifestation of unresolved grief and attachment. But here's the thing. Amidst all of that gruesome evidence, Gein insisted that he never actually had sex with the bodies.
That's right.
Saying that they smelled too bad.
Yes, and that seemingly insignificant detail really adds another layer of complexity to his already perplexing psychology.
Yeah.
If it wasn't about sexual gratification, what was driving him?
Right.
What was the real purpose of the woman's suit and all of the other gruesome creations?
It seems his motivations were much deeper than just simple necrophilia.
Yeah.
There was something darker, much more disturbing at play.
Absolutely.
And it speaks to that dark and twisted nature of the psyche.
A disturbing puzzle, and we've only just begun to piece it together.
Yeah.
Ed Gein's case is a chilling reminder that the human mind is capable of extraordinary brilliance and unimaginable darkness.
This is a lot to process, but I'm definitely hooked. We've laid the groundwork, but there's so much more to uncover. We'll pick up in part 2, where we'll dive deeper into the psychological and societal factors that contributed to Gein's crimes.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the unsettling world of Ed Gein.
Yeah, it's safe to say we left off on a pretty dark note last time. exploring those early influences and the escalation of his crimes.
Yeah, we've laid down a foundation.
Right.
But let's try to unpack the psychology a little bit more.
Okay.
Because I think amidst all those gruesome details, there's a human being that we're trying to understand.
Yeah.
Deeply disturbed, yes. But understanding how he became that way is crucial.
Yeah. And, you mentioned earlier how Ed sought to recapture his mother's presence, almost literally, and that kind of ties into this idea of psychotic identification, right?
Absolutely.
Could you break that down a bit for our listeners?
Yeah, so psychotic identification is a complex psychological phenomenon
Okay.
where an individual, often experiencing a break from reality, deeply identifies with another person,
Right.
to the point of blurring their own identity with that of the other person.
Okay.
In Ed's case, his intense and unhealthy attachment to his mother, coupled with his distorted worldview, may have led him to believe that by wearing her skin, he could somehow become her,
Wow.
keep her a part of him.
So it wasn't just about wanting to be close to her, but literally inhabiting her being.
Exactly.
It's like a twisted form of mourning, a desperate attempt to deny her death.
Precisely. And, that speaks to the depth of his psychological disturbance.
Yeah.
He wasn't just acting out of malice or sadism.
Right.
There was this really deeply rooted psychological component that was driving his actions. A component that was shaped by his upbringing, his isolation, and his warped perception of the world.
So it's like the woman's suit and the masks. They weren't just trophies, they were attempts at transformation, at becoming something that he felt was missing in his life.
Exactly.
Wow, what role did societal attitudes towards mental illness play in Gein's story?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, this was the 1950s.
Right.
Mental health was poorly understood.
Right, and treatments were barbaric.
Yeah, there was a lot of stigma around mental illness. People didn't talk about it openly.
Right.
And those who suffered were often ostracized or even locked away.
Exactly. So could there have been opportunities to intervene, to provide him with help? Or was this descent into darkness inevitable regardless of societal factors?
It's nature versus nurture.
It really is. And Ed Gein's case is a really stark example of how those two forces can collide with tragic consequences.
Yeah, we could see the seeds in his childhood, but was it predetermined, or were there points where his path could have been altered?
It's a really haunting question.
It is. And, it's easy to get caught up in the gruesome details, but you're right, there's a bigger picture here.
Right.
And speaking of the bigger picture, there's something that I find really fascinating about Gein's case. And that's his lasting impact on pop culture. He's become this morbid cultural touchstone.
He really is.
Inspiring countless horror movies and books. Why do you think that is? What is it about Ed Gein that continues to fascinate and horrify us?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
His story is disturbing, but it's resonated with audiences for decades.
Yeah, I think it's that primal fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
The idea that anyone, even the seemingly ordinary person next door, could harbor such darkness within them.
Right. He was a quiet and unassuming farmer.
Right.
But yet beneath that facade, there was a monster.
And I think that's why his story has been so influential in horror.
Yeah.
It taps into those deepest fears.
Absolutely.
Our anxieties about the darkness that exists within us all. He's become a symbol for that.
Yeah, a boogeyman for the modern age.
He really has.
Yeah, in a way, his case really helped shape the way we view and understand serial killers.
Interesting.
He was one of the first to be examined through a psychological lens, paving the way for the field of criminal profiling.
So in a sense, Gein helped to advance the very science that seeks to understand and prevent crimes just like his.
Yeah, it's a strange paradox.
It is. It underscores the complex legacy of Ed Gein.
Yeah.
Both a monster and a catalyst for change.
Right.
A figure who, despite his horrific acts, has contributed to our understanding of the criminal mind.
It really is a legacy that continues to evolve as we grapple with the complexities of his case and the fascination that it holds.
There's this morbid curiosity that surrounds his case.
Yeah.
Almost like we're trying to piece together this puzzle that's too disturbing to comprehend. As we continue our deep dive, we're going to delve into the aftermath of Gein's arrest, the trial, the lingering questions, and that unsettling truth about how his crimes shape our understanding of criminal justice and the dark world of serial killers.
It's a journey into the heart of darkness.
It really is.
But it's a journey worth taking if we want to learn from the past and safeguard the future.
Welcome back. I have to admit, after all of this discussion, it's hard to shake this feeling of unease that Ed Gein's case evokes.
Yeah.
We talked about his psychology, his upbringing, his influence on pop culture. But what about the aftermath?
Right.
Where did things go from that horrifying discovery on his farm?
Well, Gein's arrest obviously sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. His trial, it became a media sensation, fueled by the gruesome nature of the crimes and the just bizarre details.
It's like those details, the woman's suit, the skull bowls.
Yeah.
They became almost symbolic of the case itself.
Exactly. They captured the public imagination unlike many other cases.
Yeah.
And beyond the spectacle, Gein's trial really forced the legal system to grapple with the complexities of mental illness.
Right.
And remember, this was a time when psychological evaluations were far less sophisticated than they are today.
Yeah, so how did they determine his culpability? Was he considered truly insane, or was there a sense that he was manipulating the system?
Initially, he was deemed unfit to stand trial and sent to a mental institution.
Okay.
But about a decade later, after further evaluation, he was deemed competent and eventually found guilty of murder, but legally insane.
So he didn't go to prison?
Right, she didn't face prison, but he remained confined to a psychiatric institution for the rest of his life.
It's interesting to think how those proceedings might have unfolded differently today.
Oh, absolutely.
With our advances in forensic psychology and our understanding of mental illness.
For sure, Gein's case really highlights the evolution of our legal and medical systems in handling these extreme cases. You know, it's a reminder that our understanding of criminal behavior and mental illness is always evolving.
And you mentioned earlier that Gein's case, in a way, helped to advance the field of criminal profiling.
Right.
How so?
Well, before Gein, investigators often focused solely on just physical evidence, but his case, with its bizarre psychological elements and the clear link between his past and his crimes, really demonstrated the need to look deeper, to understand the motivation and the psychological makeup of the perpetrator.
It's like he inadvertently provided a blueprint for understanding the minds of other criminals.
Yeah, especially those who commit similar horrific acts.
Exactly. And his case helped pave the way for the development of more sophisticated profiling techniques.
Right.
That are still used today.
Exactly.
To solve crimes and apprehend criminals. Speaking of those gruesome artifacts, what happened to them? Did they end up in some sort of museum or something?
Well, believe it or not, there was actually talk of auctioning off the contents of Gein's house.
You're kidding.
So just imagine that, bidding on furniture upholstered in human skin.
Oh my goodness.
Thankfully, that never happened. The house mysteriously burned down before the auction could take place.
Really?
Suspected arson, though never proven.
Wow, almost like it was too disturbing.
Yeah.
Deemed it to exist.
Right.
What about his car, the one he used to transport his victims? What happened to that?
Strangely enough, it was sold to a carnival sideshow operator.
What?
Yeah, so people actually paid money to see the Ed Gein death mobile.
Oh my goodness.
It really is a testament to our morbid fascination with the macabre.
Wow.
Our desire to get close to, but not too close to, the darkness that exists in the world.
Yeah, it's a fine line we walk.
It is.
That fascination with true crime, the need to understand what drives people to these extremes. And in Gein's case, it's more than just morbid curiosity.
Yeah.
There's a genuine desire to understand what went wrong, where the system failed, how someone could become so utterly lost in their own darkness.
And I think that's the most important takeaway from all of this.
Right.
Again, story isn't just a tale of horror. It's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that the line between sanity and madness is a lot thinner than we think.
Right.
And that even the most seemingly ordinary person can harbor unimaginable darkness within them.
It's a reminder that we need to be vigilant, to pay attention to those warning signs, to recognize that mental health is just as important as physical health.
And I think most importantly, it's a reminder to approach these cases with empathy and understanding,
Yes.
not just judgment and fear.
Because ultimately, what separates us from the darkness we fear is our ability to learn from it, to grow from it, and to work towards a world where these horrors are less likely to occur.
Well said.
So while Ed Gein's story is undoubtedly disturbing, it's also a story that can teach us,
Yes.
challenge us, and ultimately help us to better understand the complexities of the human condition.
Very well said. I think it's time to bring our deep dive to a close.
Okay.
We've explored the dark world of Ed Gein, from his troubled childhood to his horrific crimes and the enduring legacy he left behind.
And even though we've reached the end of this particular journey, I have a feeling the questions that were raised by Gein's case,
Yeah.
the ethical dilemmas,
Right.
the psychological complexities will continue to resonate with us long after this episode ends.
I think so too, because in the end, the quest to understand the darkness within ourselves and the world around us is a journey that never really ends.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the unsettling world of Ed Gein.
Of course.
We'll be back soon with another fascinating and thought-provoking exploration, so stay tuned.